Welcome to a noob's guide to Boris Ursus. This is Borus, champion of the bear god, the red Bokha, who carved a bloody swath through his enemies atop his best bear buddy and single-handedly gave rise to the meme of bear cavalry Russia. A dynamic duo of death. Even after the Tzar of Kislev's death in battle, Boris's legend lingered on, much like the smell of wet bear in his palace. His daughter Katarin's first act as Tsarina was actually to summon a whole new wing just to escape it. But like Vanilla Ice, Borus is back with a brand new edition, and can be unlocked as a playable lord in Total War Warhammer III. To unlock Boris Ursus, you'll need to play as Kislev and control the cities of Prague, Erengard, and Kislev for 10 turns. A special quest battle will then pop up, and when you win, you have the option to donate a city to Borus and revive his faction, or quit that campaign and start a new one playing as everyone's favorite bear lord. But why should you want to? In this video, we'll go over Borus's lore, how that translates to gameplay, and give a few hints at his recommended playstyle. Borus was born to the sound of a war yell on the wind, as the Ungol hag witches predicted he'd die the same way he came into this world, screaming obscenities while covered in blood. After his father, Tsar Vladimir, was killed fighting against goblins east of Kislev, it fell to Borus to take the throne and finish the job of reclaiming all the lands west of the World's Edge Mountains for Kislev. Unfortunately, he inherited a nation still devastated from the Great War against Chaos, deeply divided and as backward as shoes on a duck. To drag Kislev into the modern era, he hired foreign mercenaries to whip his men into shape, emptying the treasury to train his army, rebuild their bridges and roads, and import as much black powder as the Empire could ship without blowing up the cart carrying it. Boris poured his own personal fortune into the venture, as well as that of any noble in extorting distance, and it nearly bankrupted Kislev, but it did kick off an era of reconquest, which even has some interesting real-world parallels with 16th century Poland, where King Stephen Báthory modernized the army at great cost, bringing in gunpowder, peasant infantry units, and more relevant here, the winged hussars. And if you don't know why they're awesome, for a period of about 100 years, these ostrich feather-wearing fighters were the final word in cavalry in Eastern Europe, culminating their career of ass-kicking with the largest cavalry charge in history. And as Tzar, Boris brought all of that to Kislev, and even set about reviving the cult of Urson. Boris felt that if the bear god had been good enough for their ancestors, well then it should damn well be good enough for them as well. Putting his money where his mouth was, Boris drummed up support for Urson by undertaking the trial to become one of his priests. It involved drinking his weight in vodka, jumping naked into a frozen lake, and the minor task of wandering alone into the forest to tame a bear. 18 days later, nobody had heard from him, and all signs pointed to Boris reenacting that scene from The Revenant, which even gets a reference in-game. So the boyar nobles prepared to put his 4-year-old daughter Katarin on the throne. But on the 19th day, they found him, naked, unconscious, and guarded by the biggest damn bear anyone had ever seen. These two were surrounded by an empty keg, a few dozen dead wolves, and enough blood that nobody was going to ask any pressing questions about what they'd been up to. Boris revealed that he had found this magnificent beast and seen it as a sign from Urson, and so Boris worshipped it the only way he knew how, stripping naked and fighting it barehanded. The two only stopped their fight because a pack of wolves was attracted by the scent of their mingled blood. Boris helped to defend the bear from the wolves, and when Boris was finally overcome, the bear returned the favor. He decided to name him Bear Force 1, but that was already taken, so he went with Erskine. Erskine himself was too polite to point out that he already had a name, but he does get unique golden armor, as befits King Maximus' lineage of the Pooh. Boris was then declared High Priest of Urson and leader of his Cub Scouts, taking on the new name of Boris Ursus, Boris the Bear. Not that kind of bear. But you do just know that Boris here is a Class 9 or Robin Williams level of hairy under that armor. Like all the greats though, Boris was cut down too early, dying in battle against the Kurgans deep in Troll Country. At the start of the battle, Boris and Erskine charged right into the middle of it together, but only Erskine would return, carrying his friend's body to safety, then disappearing back into the woods to mercilessly hunt down those who had killed him. Or at least that's what happened in the old lore. In Total War Warhammer 3, it's been retconned so that Borus fell into a river in the battle and was swept away, becoming entombed in ice. Your mission is to free him from it and bring back this antiquated hero of old. A completely new and original lore creation from Games Workshop, totally not pulled from Captain America, Demolition Man, or Austin Powers. The quest battle has you stopping Tzeentch cultists from freeing him and bringing Borus back under the sway of the Changer of Ways, and you save him just in the nick of time. Except that when you start Boris's campaign, this is changed in a cinematic to reveal that the game's advisor thawed him out to help save Urson in exchange for a drop of his godly BFF's blood. And to complicate it further, during Boris's campaign flyover, you hear the Red Tzar himself exclaim that it was actually Urson's pained roar that woke him from the ice. So that's 3 different versions of how he was woken up in the same game, because this wouldn't be Warhammer if the lore didn't contradict itself. So pick your own reason. Maybe the glaciers of Kislev retreated due to global warming and this is all an elaborate Encino Man shoutout. Regardless of how he got there, Boris is back, taking a page from other loud, burly, fat kings with big beards, big personalities, and even bigger appetites. To his credit, Boris Ursus doesn't come back and declare himself Tzar again. He took one look at his daughter Katerin on the throne and said, "You know what? You got this," and went off to do what he does best: exert his right to bear arms. You'll begin his campaign on the other side of the World's Edge Mountains, surrounded by orcs to the east, ogres to the north, Skaven to the west, and chaos dwarfs to the south whenever they get added. But he's not trapped in the Darklands alone. He's got bear cavalry. That's not right. Back when they were first introduced in Warhammer 6th edition, only Borus had managed to actually ride a bear. Sure, priests of Urson kept bears as companions, but riding one was like saddling a buffalo. Bad example, that was my fault. Well, you know what, I'm just off today. All of Kislev was so inspired by Boris's bear equestrian activity that they took up Urson worship and bear riding just to follow his example. Because bear cavalry are awesome, and Boris recruits them all at rank 2 for half their normal upkeep. And when he takes them off to fight chaos, his whole army gets extra leadership and attack. Everything about Boris wants to charge into battle and stay stuck in. And Boris gets in on that action at rank 11 when his best buddy Erskine returns back to his side. Together, they're super heavily armored and ridiculously tanky, which is great because it means he won't die when you charge him in. His unique skills give him even more hit points, bonuses when fighting large opponents, and surprise, extra damage for any bears in his army, even letting the elemental bear heal itself over time. You can combine that with his unique spell, the Fury of Urson, for even more damage and terror, though Boris may go on a rampage while it's active because, you know, Berserker. Luckily, when he's chewing his way through an enemy blob, it doesn't matter where he swings. When leveling, Boris even gets a unique armor and weapon automatically that doubles down on these stats, letting him take on demons of all sizes with even more bonus versus large damage, as it already takes a kielbasa longer than your arm to ride a bear, so why not swing that sausage at a hellspawn as well? For mechanics, Boris gets the exact same ones as Kostelton and Katerin, except that since you're not in Kislev, Boris doesn't actually compete to control it, and the supporter's mechanic becomes as pointless as nipples on a dude. Since you start with extra diplomacy towards his daughter Katerin, you might as well back her, so at least you'll get the warm and fuzzy feeling of having been a supportive parent. Katerin wins that fight on her own though in every playthrough I've seen, so it's not exactly like she needs you, because Boris raised a strong and independent daughter capable of leading a nation without him. And isn't that its own reward? So really just ignore the damn thing and treat Boris like the expansionist arm of the Ice Court. And as he supports them, he can also use the Ice Court mechanic, where young girls are trained to become Ice Witch heroes and lords. But the implication here is that once this 18-year-old girl graduates, she then is sent to wander out across an entire mountain range calling Boris's name until she then happens across his furry ass. Because Boris really is cut off in the nowhere. Until you can clear a path west back through the mountains to Kislev, you won't have any trade options or allies to help you. Thankfully, Boris doesn't need them, as he has bears and an overwhelming frontier spirit, building all garrison and religious buildings at half cost, so control and money are never really a problem. He even builds everything one turn faster than other lords, since there's no OSHA in the Darklands, and is able to recolonize lost settlements for free. Because Boris isn't just out there to make bear puns doesn't growl at the badger. He's bringing civilization back to the world, one battle at a time, washing away the taint and darkness with blood as only a bear knows how, grabbing hold and shaking it until it's dead, earning himself a good long nap afterwards, because this has been a noob's guide to Boris Ursun. Right, you know what all the buttons on YouTube do, so if you laughed, consider subscribing, as there's more where this came from. Or if you're a regular, throw me a monthly coffee and join the Patreon. But regardless, I hope you had a good time, and as always, thanks for watching.